Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Anna Wells and Jeff Ranke. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us every Thursday when we go live. Anna, welcome back this week.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Did you have a good trip?
Yes.
Yeah?
Always, yeah.
Has like the calm and relaxation that you achieved while on vacation already been quickly washed away?
Yeah, I mean, during the return day of 6 loads of laundry and untangling all of the bags and stuff, it was over then, but it was good.
Very good. It's good to see you again. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Pretty good, man. You?
I'm living. You know, it's kind of nice outside / also perfect weather for occasional tornadoes. So it goes from hey, let's play outside / get inside immediately.
It's super deceiving because it's really bright but cold,
yeah,
which is kind of weird. So
yeah, but no,
it's Wisconsin.
Enjoying it, just
good,
living, man.
Good.
All right. Before we jump into our first story this week, we have a word from our new sponsor. Despite being a global leader in lawn and garden care, Scott's Miracle-Gro previously managed logistics and dock schedules on spreadsheets and printed schedules. These manual processes created many headaches. Well, a new case study, available to download now, tells you how Scott's transformed logistics operations to move trucks in and out of facilities more efficiently and strengthen relationships with carriers. Download the case study from LoadSmart right now. It's available in the body copy and also in the live chat. See that? No, the link right to the right, a little lower. It's right there. All right, our first story this week. Replacing basketball's wood courts with glass. Chris Thornton works for ASB Glass Floor, a German company that makes floors made of fused together layers of safety glass covering LED panels. The courts are more dynamic than the old wood paneling because you're playing on a giant screen. The courts let venues have customized playing lines, logos, colors, animated graphics, even ads for various sports. But what about basketball, where wood remains king? Glass courts are already showing up in the NBA and internationally. Thornton says it's a high-tech alternative to the sport's long-running hardwood foundation. The glass has give and flexibility that exceeds wood. A ceramic coating with dots etched into the glass offers grip, and it can have a more consistent surface without quote-unquote dead spots, sometimes found in wood courts. Oh, and it's easier to spot the giant globs of sweat that need to be wiped up as they come cascading off of athletes. Thornton told the AP, quote, "I use this analogy a lot. We're at the initial stages of the iPhone being launched." Jeff, will these glass courts have the same revolutionary culture-changing impact as the iPhone?
I mean, I get where he's coming from. This is his baby, so he can make those types of leaps, I guess. That's okay.
Yeah.
The first thing that I thought when I looked at this was just from a grip perspective. I was worried, how do you stop? It seemed like it would be kind of more slippery than other surfaces, but looks like they've addressed that. They've used this at the All-Star game. The University of Kentucky used it for their opening practice, their midnight practice and stuff. So that tells me they're figuring that part of it out. Mm-hmm. It really reminded me of growing up and switching from different backboard materials. When I was growing up in grade school, we had sort of the composite wood type or plastic type backboards.
Yeah.
You get a little bit older, you get into high school, you get nice glass backboards, and then you keep playing and stuff, and you get the breakaway rims and everything else. And the materials continue to change. And what I experienced in every one of those is it was a much more, just sort of a truer feel. Mm-hmm. The reaction you got was consistent. The way that the ball came off the board was something you could really sort of count on being the same all the time, as opposed to wildly varying depending on the different types of materials. So I think this will undergo sort of that same development process as it's used more. There's certainly some challenges involved in rolling it out, but I do think that it's an interesting first step. I think from an entertainment perspective, it's pretty wild and pretty awesome. I know this is not where they're going, but when you think about sponsorships, I mean, you're unlimited in what you could do there and absorbing some of your operational costs potentially, and where you could use this other places too. So I think it's really interesting. I think that it's trending in a direction where we could see a lot more of it.
Yeah. And one of those challenges may be cost, but he doesn't want to talk about it, even though it's not that expensive, but he doesn't want to talk about what the cost is. Maybe one of those challenges. I agree with Jeff. I think that the visuals are a big selling point. And, when you think about the logistics, when you manage these arenas, not having to swap floors in and out, I mean, how you can pretty much change what court you're playing on with a click of a button. I don't know. That's pretty efficient.
It is. I definitely thought this was very cool at first glance. I think, I always try to look at what is the downside. Yeah. Not because I'm a negative person, but because this is a podcast and we like to debate things.
Right.
So my first thought...
not at all to be the downer.
No. Not at all. Mm-mm. But my first thought went to some of the maintenance that you might need for something like this. And it seems like with sports and arenas especially, the more customized a surface is or specific to like a manufacturer, the less control you might have over it when it comes to things like maintenance or even cleaning and upkeep. They talked about this surface with the dots.
Mm-hmm. What happens when those dots start to wear down?
Yeah. Can you clean it? Or are they going to expect you to be like calling their distributor? Is it something that you can maintain on your own in-house? I don't know. I mean, I know that
giving up the warranty.
Right. Like you hear that with artificial turf, for example, about all the stuff that comes along with it, of how that needs to be maintained very meticulously. Otherwise, you do lose that warranty. So something to think about, I think. The other thing on the collegiate level that I thought of is it's very common in a basketball arena that you're flipping that to an ice rink on a regular basis. Yeah. So how does that work out? I don't know. Those sports tend to overlap. There's a lot of colleges that don't have two arenas for those two separate sports. So does that become a barrier for them to use this? I don't know. The other thing too is like basically this is electronics, right? You're going from what is essentially a wooden puzzle to electronics.
Yeah, to a smartphone.
Right, to a smartphone. So if you are having to swap things out or deal with ice or something, like what is the wear and tear on that product itself when you're doing that? So it just made me think of, we see typical scenarios in manufacturing as well, where we're talking about moving to newer equipment, digitizing processes and things that weren't so before, and all the bells and whistles that you add more complexity in terms of operating, maintenance, wear and tear. And so, if you're doing a full 180 there, it just adds a lot of variables, right? Like, can this thing be hacked? Like, how is it programmed?
It can certainly be hacked.
Is that something that, your college student that you normally have working the weekends in your arena can do? It's just, there's a lot that comes along with it, I'm sure, that adds cost to the overall picture, and we don't know what that cost is. Long story short, I do think it's a cool product, but obviously there's some other baggage that would come along with it.
Well, and I think part of that ROI equation is, by removing the labor that it takes to install and replace and change out all these different floors. I thought the same thing about this is clearly for an arena, or in my mind, clearly for an arena that doesn't have ice. Mm-hmm. Just because I can't see laying down an ice floor on top of your new multi-million-dollar glass floor.
I can't imagine doing that.
But who knows? I also like the logistics of it, though, where, they talk about how coaches can set up their own practice drills with on-court visuals. Oh, yeah. So essentially, like the coach can lay out everything he wants to do in practice on a tablet, load that program into the floor, and kind of not set it and forget it, but, be on to other things, be able to, watch other things. I thought that was really cool.
But David, what does that do to the orange cone industry?
I think the orange cone industry is going to be okay as it becomes more of a NFT, maybe. No, Do they have the rights over the digital representation of the cone?
Oh, maybe.
Trust me, as someone who has taught youth basketball, you need the cones.
Yeah.
You need something physically there to impede them or to deflect the ball or whatever the case is.
No, I was thinking the same thing. Like, you need to actually go around it.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely needs to
because everyone's going to cheat that dot, but the cone still falls over.
Yeah, it is. It will never go out of style.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other point is that wood courts aren't necessarily going anywhere, especially given the price points. You know, elementary schools, high schools. The wood court's going to be around forever for the foreseeable future until the price comes down. But just think of how, you know, every cell phone you buy is indestructible and the screen can't be broken and it's never going to fail you. And like every time you talk to somebody, it's like, yeah, I had to get a new phone because mine just bricked for some reason. Like there are just so many unknowns when it comes to consumer electronics. And I do think that is a real vulnerability or something to really consider when you're investing millions of dollars into a new floor.
True.
Especially with all that income that's got to go to the athletes now. So, all right. Our next most popular story this week. Trump's tariffs sends shockwaves through sporting good industry. Rustan Hockey is the oldest hockey business in the world. But with headquarters in Canada, let's just say that the company has been fielding some calls from panicked U.S. buyers over the last few weeks. The company makes and sells more than 100,000 hockey sticks annually to the U.S. market. President Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian imports have caused headaches throughout the commercial ecosystem. According to the AP, the sports equipment industry is no exception, with many products made outside the U.S. Rustan Hockey bought out the Christian and Northland brands that used to be made in Minnesota. Now, everything is made in Brantford, Ontario. About 40% of Rustan's business is from the United States. About 90% of sales for those Christian and Northland gear brands go to American customers. Jeff, okay, let's start this tariff party with a bang.
Can we go back talking to basketball?
No.
You know
all
what?
in on hockey and tariffs.
All right.
We're going to massage the tariff conversation with a little hockey banter, which we're all very well versed in that sport.
Mm-hmm. Lots to say about hockey over here.
After 178 years in business, Rustan says that they might have to close up shop for good. I know that it's oversimplifying, but is the potential path of least resistance to just restart operations in Minnesota?
I mean, no. I mean, we've talked about this, and that's one of the things that you try to touch on here. And you want to make this, you don't make this a political conversation, but you can't help from making it a political conversation. So when it comes to all those things regarding removing manufacturing any place, it doesn't matter if it's over a state border. It's a huge deal. There's so many different factors that need to be taken into consideration, from your supply chain to your workforce to financial elements to how things are taxed differently in Canada versus the U.S. There's so many things that need to be taken into consideration, which is why it's not a decision that's made in the course of 2 months.
Yeah,
it's a decision that's made over the course of 18 months to 2 years or more for a lot of these companies, which is why whenever we talk about this tariffs, I'm always the guy who's like, just be patient. We'll see how it plays out. That's not going to work here. That's not a realistic dynamic given all of the different players and stakeholders that are involved. When you look at consumers, they're going to have to make a lot of hard choices here. This is going to hurt across the board because it's not something that's pinpointed at leveling any specific playing field. It's looking at everything. So it's starting with things like hockey equipment that are affecting families, but it's going to lead into groceries and cars and consumer electronics and everything else that is used and purchased on a daily basis.
Literally
Even
everything.
gas. Yeah.
Everything, yes.
So how are consumers going to feel, and how long are they going to be able to be like, you know what? Because there's still a lot of people buying into President Trump's focus on bringing jobs back to the U.S. and reshoring manufacturing. How long are they going to be able to handle these price increases? We're going to start seeing 401k quarterly reports coming out, and people are going to be seeing how much Wall Street hates these tariffs and how that is impacting things in terms of not just right now, but longer term. What's their patience level going to be? Well, how impatient can manufacturers be that have also bought into Trump's agenda and are on board with what the administration wants to do? When you start looking at the fact that they're already going to need to start forecasting for 2026, and that's been made nearly impossible because there's so little visibility into what's going to go on with a lot of these tariffs until yesterday.
Yeah.
This supposedly gives some clarity, but that's still going to present a ton of sourcing and pricing issues. And then how does that impact your production forecasting? So all of these things have made much more difficult. And then when you get to the legislative perspective, legislators who, if you are opposed to Trump, are going to be jumping all over this immediately with all of the price increases and all the lack of manufacturing that's going to come back immediately. He pointed out a number of companies in his press conference when he announced these tariffs. All of those things were in place before. I'm sorry. Those were not a reaction to tariffs. Those were things that were put in place either through the CHIPS Act or were made even before he was elected. So those were not appropriate. Those were not accurate descriptions there. So you have to take that into account. So the legislators are going to be very impatient in pointing out how this is not working. And let's be honest, the Trump administration has not been one to be real patient about anything and see how it plays out. So with all of those different factors at play here, in my opinion, we're going to feel this pain for a while. By the end of this year, I see a lot of these things being pulled back. And maybe that's more of an optimistic perspective, but that's my personal opinion. Yeah. And what I think you're going to see at that point, hopefully, is then taking some of the right approaches to tariffs. Talking about all those things we've discussed before in terms of pinpointing we have a problem with steel not being a fair market right now. Yeah. Talking about tariffs on steel. Looking at things like consumer electronics coming from Asia. Trying to create a manufacturing infrastructure there. Trying to stop the flow of automotive production to Mexico. Those are all things where tariffs potentially could have a positive impact on U.S. manufacturing very quickly without causing all this widespread harm. That's where this is going to play out because I just think there is a lack of patience on all of those levels. Not only because we don't want to, we can't. It's not realistic. The economy will not work that way on a global level if there's this level of disruption. So it starts with hockey sticks, I guess is my point, and I just see it going to a much greater level. This is sort of a microcosm of what we're going to be dealing with for probably at least the next 6 months.
When we talk about all this leading to reshoring and new jobs, but all of that, isn't that based off of information based off of buying tendencies for people at current prices? You know, when all of this changes and all of the prices change, you know, people are going to buy less. People aren't going to buy these things at all.
Well, and that's what's going to be so disruptive. When you look at, and this is per the Department of Commerce, half of the goods made in the U.S. leave the U.S. They're bought by somebody else. So how do you make up that loss? Or not all of it, you wouldn't think, but you're a big part of it when you see all those reciprocal tariffs that are going to be taking place. So you can talk about the double-digit numbers from Vietnam and Cambodia and all those other places. The UK at 10%. If we jack ours up 10, that's going to go to 20. That is going to impact the ability for those consumers to buy our stuff. So if we're selling less overseas and it costs more to buy it here, where do we give here? Where's the win? It's not going to happen soon enough for anybody to tolerate the reshoring because that's going to take years.
Well, and some of what's been done does make sense to me. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the patience that we're talking about. How things are going to hurt for a little bit, how things are going to be difficult, right? And how we need patience. One of the things that I actually give the administration credit for was saying that they don't know yet if they have the resources, like the human capital, to actually make all of these new tariffs work functionally. Like, I mean, and God help us if they expect all of this tariff enforcement to just be automated.
Why are you giving anyone credit for that?
Well, because they at least said that they admitted that they're doing it and they don't know if they have the resources for it. That they admitted that there is an actual potential, even though they said just maybe this little thing might not work. But I give them credit that they at least said that.
I don't. Yeah, Jeff, you said a lot that
You said a lot.
You said a lot that I agree with on this. One of the things that, as you mentioned, just to blanket and not look at piecemeal imbalances where it really makes sense. Obviously, the Biden administration applied its own tariffs. This is not the first time in history that anyone has applied tariffs, but they were very selective in industry specific. You look at... So this article obviously focused on sporting goods. You look at industries where we don't have an equivalent product being produced in the U.S. at this time. Like if you look at something like footwear, for example, almost 100% of footwear is being produced overseas and it's imported into the U.S. That's what we buy. So It's not like if you're shopping for football cleats for your kid, you have 10 manufacturers lining up to take your business that are domestically based. Those companies don't really exist. Mm-hmm. So that's a big problem when you're looking at applying tariffs to those categories. I mean, bananas, coffee, why aren't these industries exempt? We don't make those products here in the United States. So I think that being more selective would be advantageous instead of these blanket conditions. You look at, back to footwear, you look at a company like Nike. Mm-hmm. Their stock took an absolute nosedive today for that exact reason, because they are not, you think of Nike as being an American brand. Well, they produce everything overseas. So if you have China sitting at a 54% effective tariff rate, that's going to cause some pain. And so obviously this article, it started focused on sporting goods. I think it was maybe a little bit disproportionately focused on Canada. Mm-hmm. China, in fact, is the largest exporter of sporting goods products in the world.
Yeah. What was the other one? It was Asia, and then what was the other one that does a lot of sporting equipment too? I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry.
That's okay. It just, I think you have to remember too that, when people are faced with a situation where they have dwindling income because they're paying more for products, they start to tighten up their belts. And the first place that they stop spending is in categories like leisure, hospitality, restaurants, and retail. So, the person in this article, I don't think you mentioned the family that they profiled in the article, but they were talking about how expensive their son's hockey equipment was. And they basically summed up at the end, like, we'll make it work somehow. He really loves it. We're going to figure it out. But the reality of that for many Americans is they just go without.
Yeah, they won't. Yeah. Or they can't.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see that here. We're going to see that in many other industries as these continue to play out. I agree with you. I don't see this being a long-term position for the administration because in my opinion, they did this now to see what they could negotiate out.
Manage the fallout.
Well ahead of the midterms.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to let this run into the ground all the way out to 2026. But whatever short-term pain takes place between now and when things get pulled back, if they do, is going to be significant. People will lose their jobs. Companies will scale back. We already have seen, one day into this, we've already seen layoffs in the U.S. Stellantis announced 900 layoffs today. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know how long, to your point, like how patient are people going to be to see this?
They can't be. It's not even a desire. Mm-hmm. It's not realistic.
Well, on the footwear, that point, not just, athletic gear, but I've been talking to a couple of people in the industry where they're looking for an American-made workwear alternative, and there just isn't a quality shoe that they can use to wear at work made in America. Like, it's just not an option that they have. But I will say that the way that it is laid out, a lot of it makes sense to me, and I suppose that you could somewhat make an argument for, like you said, the administration wanted to just kind of rip off the Band-Aid rather than trying to like massage in a new era of trade. But I mean, this is an administration that is built by blunt force. And I do think that when you hold up a poster that says like, hey, we're just asking for them to pay half what they charge us, I think a lot of that makes sense to a lot of Americans. I also think that another thing that they did that was good was they closed the de minimis loophole, which was something that we covered a couple of months ago about any goods, not just from China, but from other countries as well, that are orders less than $800 that don't have to pay any sort of duties. They closed that loophole, and I think that is a good thing. But I think that when everything is kind of forced and kind of you're brushing in broad strokes, I think that causes a lot of confusion and anger and disruption. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of the good or potential good that came through this gets overshadowed. Like, I don't know. I think that they could have been, as to Jeff says a lot, a little bit more scalpel. I think that it could have been quite effective. But unfortunately, it's tumultuous right now.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is it's easy to look at some of those numbers in a vacuum and be like, yeah, Cambodia, if it's 58%, we can do half of that. But we don't know the scale.
Yeah.
We don't, there's just so many additional factors. It's also not just getting a product to the U.S., it's not just getting here. There's a lot of other costs that are incurred that are not experienced in other countries. And that's where some of those tariffs come into play. I'm not endorsing them. I'm not saying I'm in favor of them. I'm just saying it's not an apples to apples dynamic when you compare those tariffs. If there's not one here and there is someplace else, we're a global economy. We need to embrace that. There are areas we can improve, but some of this stuff is just going to be way more painful than necessary.
Yeah.
And it's going to impact the consumer. So you can say in theory that you want to pay back those countries by applying a tariff in kind or reciprocally or however you want to say that. But they're not paying it.
No, understood.
They're going to raise they're going to raise their prices.
Absolutely.
And that's already Walmart has been in discussions with their Chinese suppliers, and they've asked them to swallow. Initially, they asked them to swallow the 10%. And China said absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to raise their prices. We will pay that at Walmart or whatever. And that's how that will go. That's not doing anything good for Americans.
Well, and I think it's also very thinly veiled, right? It was branded as Liberation Day. Everyone else understood that it was the highest taxation day in American history, or in the last more than 100 years, right? Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Well,
We kind of got going there.
yeah. Sorry. I mean, tariff talk is a hard one to keep to like a simple 5, but
Yeah, we could talk this whole
time
about it.
I mean, to
There's a lot
that
of
point,
factors.
like when you look at the top 5 stories on our site, it's clearly a hot issue with everyone in every part of the industry that we touch, which is very far-reaching, because in our top 10, almost like 8 out of 10 the last few weeks have all been tariff-related, and rightfully so, because nobody knows exactly what's happening or how to adjust. So it remains a very fluid situation, and hopefully becomes a little bit more clear. All right. Our next most popular story, it's another bit contentious. Boomers and Gen X business leaders are making a big mistake. Think Gen Z is the issue? Well, Ralph Weiser, senior leader at Chadwick Optical, in a column this week says, maybe it's you, not them, who need to change. And people were fired up about it. Weiser is a Gen Xer, and he is, quote, absolutely flummoxed by his business peers, quote, poo-pooing and belly aching over Gen Z. While managers say they want a 35 to 45-year-old worker who wants to work and can stay off their phones, Weiser says he's impressed with Gen Z and millennials, and I hear millennials are just the best. He says they want to know if they will be working for a pump and dump company where only money counts. Purpose is, quote, super important to them. Will they be allowed to make a difference on the job? And we've talked about it a lot. Perhaps most importantly, though, will there be training on the job? Weiser has experienced some quitting on the job without having secured another one just because a manager refused to listen to their concerns and repeated requests for training and support. Meanwhile, the older folks kind of knuckle down and work harder, later, longer, before they finally retire. I mean, and on average, Weiser says it takes around 2 to 3 younger workers to do the job of such Gen X and Boomer workers. Only the later generations, he says, are okay with a totally screwed up work-life balance. Knuckle down, come in early, stay late, and figure stuff out on the fly because there's nobody else who would work like this. Weiser has found Gen Z team members to be incredibly talented. He says they're creative, they want to help however they can, including recruiting young talent and embracing technology like no other generation before. He says, quote, why on earth would you not want this talent to show up at your doorstep? Anna, Weiser says Gen Z is very interested in the big picture and they want to be included in it. Is it on older generations to kind of pull them into the fold, even when these generations were kind of the ones that were left at the gates when they were starting out in terms of being pulled in?
No, I mean, like I actually had there was a lot that he said that I agreed with. I do find it difficult to understand being resentful of being asked for to provide information to people about, goals. Like offering a purpose should be easy.
Yeah.
Offering insight into training programs and how you might enable upward mobility for these folks if they came on board. Those should be easy questions to answer. Those should not be riling anyone up. And, are the younger workers expecting more in terms of fulfillment? Yes, they are. But I think you can really view that in a positive way, in my opinion. If you look at your current workforce, it's really the most engaged people that you have who are looking for opportunities and inroads and trying to grow their career, working extra hard, trying to make a difference in that company. They're looking for more responsibilities and, with it, more money, probably. So what if you could build like some sort of baseline engagement level just right off the bat, instead of expecting people to kind of bootstrap it on their own and then see who survives. Like that seems like a very silly way to do it. It's very indirect and opaque. And if you could be transparent and try to, bring people in that way instead of creating some complex guessing game, I feel like that is a better approach. And so
isn't that the problem though? Because that's the old approach. Here's the new way of doing things. And I think that part of that argument is that it is just hard mentally to make that evolution. Make that change.
Right. And I'm saying there's a benefit to it.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe it's hard to make that change, but if you look at the results, which is maybe you can nurture a workforce that is collectively engaged in your business and wanting to make it more successful, why would you not do that?
Yeah.
Like, why would you expect, just people figure it out? I'm sorry, I don't have time for this. It's dumb that you asked. Like, yeah. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I think the quote that stood out to me was that, and you mentioned it as well, only the later generations are okay with a totally screwed up work-life balance, knuckle down, come in early, stay late, and figure stuff out on the fly. Like, what? So people don't want to work that way anymore. Fine. Like, you have to come to terms with that, I think, and embrace it and figure out a way to make that work to your advantage. But yeah, like it's not a healthy way. That's how you generate burnout in people. That's why you get people quitting, because they don't know how to advance in your organization, or they don't understand what it is that you're really doing. Just nip it in the bud, start strong, cater to that need and make it work for you.
It is, as someone that kind of came up over the course of that evolution, where, knuckle down, be quiet, do your job, expect long hours.
You have never been quiet.
Well, do your job. And fair. But I do think that I think a lot of people, it's really easy to say you got to do that, but it's really hard to change the way you've always done things and understand how to do them. And I think that takes some re-education on the part of upper management as well.
It certainly does. I'm just saying that it should be you should be motivated to do that because there is a result there. It's not just how do I deal with the new generation, but how do I optimize what it is that they need, make that work for my business.
Well, and also just in terms of viability, it's great if you would rather have a 35 or 45-year-old who's going to work it to the bone and stay off his phone. But realistically, you need new workers to sustain your business throughout, for the foreseeable future, right? But so, Jeff, one of the points that stood out to me was that Weiser admits that sometimes it takes 3 Gen Zers to replace a Gen X or a Boomer. I mean, is that acceptable, or is that just a harsh new reality? Because now, if all of a sudden we're talking about replacing one person and we're going to need 3, that just resets the equation, and that might be a little bit more scary than people are willing to deal with.
I think sometimes we get lazy when it comes to our management approaches, strategies, what we've done right and wrong, all of those things. And we try to put it on these generational labels. I've always struggled with these because a lot of these things that they talk about that the Gen Z workforce expresses maybe more frequently, more adamantly than others. Anybody that I've hired, this isn't new. Yeah. This has always been part of the conversation. I think what's evolved is the fact that we've got better management people now coming into play who've had more training, more experience, more appreciation for what it's like to be in a bad situation and wanting to make it better. I can go, a couple different situations come to mind. My dad, was a tool and die maker. And whenever we talk about career path and things like that, what he talked to me about is don't just take a job, do something you're going to enjoy, all of that type of stuff. Again, not focusing on money. What does that sound like? That was a baby boomer working in a factory telling me these things. So these are some of these generalizations I struggle with. The other thing, in the Army, we went through non-commissioned officer courses. You're basic and then you're not advanced. Half of it was basically just communicating with your people. This is in the Army where you can give orders and basically make people do stuff. And it was like, no, that doesn't work. You need to explain to them what the mission is, help them understand their role so that they can execute it more effectively. That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not real complicated stuff. But I think initially we had a generation of managers who maybe didn't receive that training, didn't understand the dynamics of, a little more a little more carrot than stick and the longer term benefits. And they went with what they kind of figured out as opposed to the benefits of more time and experience and realizing what's going to work best. All the best bosses I had, regardless of the generation that they fit in, did all the stuff that was talked about in this article.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do think that we are talking about things like burnout that, have helped people.
Okay, but in my opinion, that is an individual thing.
It
Individuals are going to burn out at different levels. And it is up to the manager to understand how you push people.
Yeah.
And that only comes from interacting with them and understanding them. There are some folks you can push and push and push, and you're going to get more out of them. There are others you just can't do that with.
Yeah.
There's a certain limitation there, and you have to embrace that. So again, that's an individual thing that doesn't feel like a generational thing.
No, I'm not talking about it as a generational thing. I think like the realization, like basically labeling it. So that way now, and I'm not looking at it from a management perspective, but from a worker perspective, that labeling it, that this is burnout and that overworking yourself can have negative impacts. I think that helped that switch from just like, no, I just come and I work every day and maybe I get promoted for my hard work. It just is another part of the equation. And I think that it does make a better workplace. I think but I also think that, in previous generations, it was more expected that you stay in a job even if you didn't like it. Whereas now it has just become like, if I don't like it right now, not just today, I'm leaving and never coming back. I mean, that is a generational thing, right? Like, I mean,
I don't agree with that. I think that's an individual thing. I think it's been perpetuated, okay, and maybe it's been reinforced in some individuals by their parents or whatever. But I still feel like that's an individual dynamic. Again, I can look back to my grandparents. They were same generation, very different approaches and very different attitudes on things. So I understand why we do some of this because it makes it easier to process and compartmentalize. I just don't always. I don't know. Think it's as accurate.
I understand that. And I thought that too when I was reading this, that like I've worked with plenty of people over the years, and you can't say that every Gen X and Boomer person is incredibly driven and effective. All the Gen Z people are just like skating by or like wanting to get a cookie every day or whatever. This is just not a fair assessment.
No, but I think these are all generalizations. I think that, yes, in every generation, every place of business, you have your overachievers, your high performers, and you have the people that will, move throughout the company a lot quicker than other people. And you do have people that will just be in that same position and be content for the entire time. You have all across the board. But I do think that there are these sort of like, again, broad strokes that we can paint generationally, and there are going to be outliers, regardless of who you're talking about.
Of course. And I just think that like if you're wanting to get high performers, you're going to get them at any level. And why not make it a good environment for them, depending on what it is that they need? Give it to them. Don't roll your eyes. Yeah. Just give it to them,
Yeah. Or, give it to them and then breathe, retire to your office, and then roll your eyes.
Yes. Fine, yeah.
Because we're not talking about like big asks here, right? We're talking about better interviewing, onboarding, being more authentic, having more transparency, and having more communication. And like when those are the arguments and people are just like, what, are you joking? I'm like,
I know.
I don't understand.
We can do it,
the other side of that argument.
I think we can do it.
All right. Well, our next most popular story this week, flooring manufacturer raided for alleged labor trafficking. A flooring manufacturer in Cartersville, Georgia, was recently raided as part of a, quote, active ongoing labor trafficking investigation. Agents from the FBI, ICE, and other agencies entered the Wellmade Industries building to execute federal search warrants. The company allegedly used fraud and coercion to persuade Chinese nationals and other immigrants to work. Agents also raided multiple residences in the area. The facility's owner and another family member were even arrested on state charges. A former employee described, quote, unsafe conditions, overcrowded housing, and a rotating shift system that transported workers between their homes and work. Jeff, on the surface, this seems pretty straightforward. Labor trafficking has to be stopped, but the fallout will be far-reaching. And one of the things that you hope is that they kind of do right by these workers so they kind of get the help that they need.
This is kind of crazy when you look into this company, just because of the size and scale. I mean, we've talked about these unfortunate situations before with forced labor, underage labor, and they were suppliers to somebody that sort of brought more notoriety to the story. These guys are they're huge, and they do supply. I mean, this is like a Costco supplier. I mean, they're everywhere. And when you look at the history of this company as well, it's actually pretty impressive. I mean, this guy came from China, had a great idea over there, developed distribution and manufacturing here in the U.S., grew this to a 300-some square foot manufacturing facility. But I think what was lost in all of that is culture. Mm-hmm. You can't do the same things in China that you do in the U.S. You can't, and vice versa. And it just feels like when you look at some of the responses from employees who worked at this facility, some talked about being paid well. Some were like, it was an absolute horror. I mean, in terms of a lack of safety, a lack of training, stuff all over the place. So you don't know if it was just an understanding of maybe that's the way it is in some Chinese factories. Maybe it was just the fact that they were producing so much that it led to a lack of organization and attention to detail. But to me, it feels more than anything on a horrific level. By the way, I'm not just blowing this off like, they were from someplace else and they didn't get it.
It's a different way of life over there.
No, they made horrible, horrible choices here and cut some corners. And it just feels like an inability to bring in more maybe local managers. Definitely hurt them here, and it's going to have a detrimental effect on this. This is a big business.
Yeah,
it's a huge business.
100,000 square feet of flooring annually. That is what they
produced.
Yeah,
that's not. Is that correct? Does that seem like not very much?
I mean, it seems like
that seems like a lot.
I don't know.
100,000 square feet
of flooring annually.
Their facility is 300,000 square feet. Think about that. It would take them 3 years to floor their own factory.
Okay, so maybe they were terribly inefficient too.
It seems low.
Well,
that's what it said. I fact checked it because I was like, "That's
okay."
What
so
their website says.
So maybe the numbers are a little off there. But Anna, on the slavery, that's bad though, right?
Sure is. Yeah, the tagline the company has on its website is "American to the core."
Ooh.
Ugh.
I don't think so.
I know. So like stomach turning to read that phrase when you consider what they're accused of doing, which is like coercing and taking advantage of people who are immigrants or people with few options potentially, and then the unsafe conditions as alleged in this report. So I hope that's not American to the core. Jeff, you brought up Costco. That was my first thought here. I don't have a ton to add. I just it was interesting to me to see how much they were very forward about how, like, hey, we do private label stuff. We work with these big retailers and these distributors. Sometimes when this stuff happens and it's a product like this that doesn't have a consumer-facing brand, I feel like sometimes the impacts get a little bit muted because there's not a consumer backlash that you would get for like a Nike or a Coca-Cola. Yeah. People know what those are. Yeah,
it's like the generic eye drops controversy, right? It wasn't tied to a brand, so it was just like people went after Target.
Yeah, like I don't know what kind of floor I even have in my own house. Yeah. I don't know where that came from. And I think that's common. But the retailers and the distributors and any manufacturing partners that this company has, they do know. And the last thing they want is to be associated with any type of scandal that's related to human and labor trafficking. I mean, that's just as bad as it gets. So despite the fact that, this company owner was arrested, if the company is able to survive that, I think it's going to also lose a lot of business based on the fact that it did this and its supply partners, like a Costco, for example, they don't want to be touching that with a 10-foot pole. So a lot of fallout to come or, maybe has already happened based on that.
Well, and when you read this story and then you have to go back and read that it's in Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. Because if this is a story that we've covered from, sometimes those unregulated overseas labor essentially labor camps where people are housed all in the same dorm. They have to install the nets because people are jumping off the roof. Like I was getting more of that feel from this sort of situation. And it was shocking that it was happening in the U.S. All right, our most popular story this week. Trump pardons Nikola founder. Nikola founder Trevor Milton was convicted of fraud and sentenced to prison. But then he received a full and unconditional pardon from President Donald Trump. Milton's pardon came 2 weeks after acting U.S. Attorney Matthew Podolsky asked a court to order Milton to pay nearly $676 million in restitution to his defrauded victims. That's more than $500 million in restitution. In 2022, a jury convicted Milton for deceiving investors about the zero-emission 18-wheel truck maker's technology. During the trial, prosecutors say Milton rebranded a GM vehicle as a Nikola truck and provided evidence of doctored videos that hid the truck's flaws. The jury convicted Milton on 1 count of securities fraud and 2 counts of wire fraud, and a judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison in 2023. Milton has financial ties to Trump and the Republican Party, including a $920,000 donation to Trump's fundraising committee and hundreds of thousands more to various Republican committees and politicians. Nikola has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection because it's otherwise going to run out of money sometime this year. Anna, we often talk about making penalties harsher, right, to ward off future bad actors, whether or not it comes from typically safety. But doesn't something like this just set the going rate for a pardon?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't set the tone, that's for sure. I think it's most certainly a loss for American consumers. This individual tricked investors, causing retail investors to lose an estimated $660 million. Obviously, he presented his company and its capabilities in a deceptive way. And for reference, Nikola's stock dropped from $1,977 per share in June of 22 to 18 cents as of early this year. It's a lot of money in the toilet, right? But add to that the fact that they actually sold a few hundred of these vehicles that they had to recall because of flawed batteries that were causing fires, which is like just another, leg to the table when you consider how this individual's wrongdoing generally, right? Yeah. Not to mention, also, they stiffed a bunch of creditors, and the company owes between $1 and $10 billion right now in debt. They're bankrupt, as you mentioned. So Trevor Milton has denied being part of the problem. He was very smug about he could have seen that coming when they filed for bankruptcy because he's been out of the picture for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's reasonable to suggest that he didn't play a major role in the downfall of this company when you look at all the fraud and deception that was taking place under his oversight. And you can't separate that from the company's ensuing downward spiral. So, to me, pardons like this tell white-collar criminals that they can play fast and loose with consumers and then buy their way out of it. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're seeing. On a personal level, and I don't think this necessarily applies here, but it frustrated me as a, like an
advocate for EVs?
Yeah, I think that the EV industry has struggled to, some of these startups have worked really hard to get to make a name for themselves in the industry. And if you're just putting out compromised battery systems and that's causing this perception that EVs are not safe because they start on fire. Mm-hmm. That does a disservice to anyone in that industry, anyone who's thinking about buying an EV. And it's just frustrating. So again, that's not really something that I think matters a lot to this story right now, which I think the crux of this is that taking a bunch of money from this person and then giving him a get out of jail free card really doesn't speak to all of the crimes that were under this guy's watch and out of his own hands that took place. So
no, it just made me wonder if Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos has already made a donation.
Yeah, no kidding.
Trying to just figure out the logistics. Jeff, I feel like it could be part of the risk analysis now. Hey, okay, as long as I set aside $1.8 million, I can pocket the rest and buy my way out of trouble.
It's hard to argue. I mean, especially when you look at this guy, and he actually had the guts to say he doesn't think his donation had anything to do with his pardon.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sure
I mean,
not.
looked right in the camera and said it. I honestly, when you look at those types of comments and everything else he said, I honestly believe this guy is a sociopath. He honestly does not believe he did anything wrong. And in addition to that ridiculous example you had of rolling the truck down the hill, I mean, let's not forget the fact that he falsified orders. He told shareholders, we've got this many reservations for vehicles, and there wasn't anything close to it.
Yeah.
How that's not fraud on some level, I don't
Oh, it is.
understand.
No, they said it was fraud, but then they just said like, oh, don't worry about it, your pardon.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. He actually has his own website, trevormilton.com. And this is the part that really got me. He said, in setting up why he should have an appeal before he was actually pardoned, he said the defense argues that the court's instruction on willfulness was incorrect, get this, because it did not clearly state that Milton had to know his actions were unlawful to be guilty. So basically what he's saying is they didn't tell the jury that he had to realize what he was doing was wrong in order to be guilty.
Yeah.
So basically the jury kind of figured that one out for themselves.
That is like a 3-year-old's argument.
100%.
Yeah.
And there is a lot more of that again, which leads me back to this sort of sociopathic perspective of, you know what? It's the stock market and they invested in something and it didn't work out. That's what happens. Yes, that can be what happens. But when you deliberately lie and deceive them to get that money, that makes you a criminal. The fact that he has said he has no interest in repaying any of these other stakeholders, the fact that he has no significant repentance or feels bad for what he did is absolutely pathetic. If you want to really see what a loser this guy is, he is coming out with a YouTube documentary diving into his situation. One of the things that I had to laugh about there was a claim in the trailer where one of his cronies basically saying, we had all these people at this manufacturing plant making stuff. What do you think we were doing? You were trying to make a truck that didn't work.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Everybody knows you were trying, you couldn't do it, and then you lied about it. The other thing that I worry about with this, and Anna touched on this in terms of setting a price basically for pardons, there is a very dangerous message right now when it comes to a lot of these tech entrepreneurs not being held accountable.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that are being done at a government level to roll back some of these regulatory efforts that are in place to stop anybody from just running wild and throwing any product on the market and getting as much money as they can for it. There has to be checks and balances there. I know I'm the limited government guy, but when it comes to regulating new product development and making people actually follow through on things from the SEC and other safety boards, that needs to stay in place.
Yeah.
We need to keep an eye on that.
Well, and just if Nikola, if the trajectory is 4 years later and he's creating this fraud now, maybe that truck makes it more of those trucks are on the market. If Theranos happens now, maybe those devices are in the market and people actually think they're working, and people die as a result. I think that we need to really reconcile with if this is the culture we want, that we want to live in, where there are no consequences for people that are willing to pay the toll, right? With and the other one that kind of stood out to me was how a part of the story, anyways, how this is already a joke, right? This happened a week ago, and a former executive of a Mars Candy subsidiary, Paul Steed, was charged with stealing $28 million from the company, right? One reader commented, quote, just use whiteout over the name Trevor Milton, write in Paul Steed on the pardon, government efficiency thing, saves paper and ink. And I'm like, oh my God, we are headed down this path, a very dangerous path that is excused by our culture's worship over wealth. Can we just go back to simple celebrity worship? Where now people worship the ultra wealthy and think man, they won humanity. And as a result, they should be treated special. And that it is simply not the case. I don't know. I think it is very dangerous and how quickly, as a result of the overall temperature, people are just like, new normal. Am I right? Yeah, just $2 million. And you can throw anything on the market and be accused of fraud and $500 million. And it's just funny to people. I don't know. Scary. All right. In case you missed it segment, will come just after this message from our new sponsor. Despite being a global leader in lawn and garden care, Scott's Miracle-Gro previously managed logistics and dock schedules on spreadsheets and printed schedules. These manual processes created many headaches. Well, a new study from LoadSmart, available to download now, tells you how Scott's transformed logistics operations to move trucks in and out of facilities more efficiently and strengthen relationships with new carriers. Download the case study now. There's a link in the body copy as well as the live chat. Let's move on to In Case You Missed It. Stories maybe not as popular on our websites because they didn't have anything to do with tariffs or pardons, and might still have a significant impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what's your In Case You Missed It this week?
Well, I thought I would just keep it on the downtrend of our theme of our podcast today, which has been a little bit dark. And I selected a story about how the EPA is now offering industrial polluters a way to avoid rules on mercury, arsenic, and other toxic chemicals. So the Trump administration is offering coal-fired power plants and other industrial polluters a chance to apply for exemptions from requirements to reduce emissions of toxic chemicals. So the EPA set up basically an email mailbox that can allow regulated companies to request an exemption. They're basically supposed to just send an email and ask for permission to not have to follow these restrictions. Environmental groups have denounced the offer, calling the email address a polluters portal that could allow hundreds of companies to evade laws meant to protect the environment and public health. Exemptions include, hold on, I lost my page here. Exemptions would be allowed for 9 EPA rules issued by the Biden administration, including limits on mercury, ethylene oxide, and other hazardous air pollutants. We learned a lot about mercury over the years and its impact on unborn fetuses, children, and it can lead to birth defects if exposed in the womb. It's not a good chemical to be exposed to at any time. But anyway, I selected this story because I just wanted to make sure that it got a little bit more attention than it did. I know that we're not all going to agree politically at all times, but I do think that it's generally fair to say that most of us don't want toxic chemicals in the air that we breathe and the water that we drink and swim in and fish in. Some of these chemicals we know are super toxic and not what we want around our kids and the like. So, I think it's frustrating to consider that it's being replaced with a process that has basically a ton of subjectivity to just send an email and then just someone decides, I think is not the route we want to go through in terms of like if somebody has a reason. I'd like to have some more transparency there, I guess. So I don't know. It's easy to pretend that these things don't matter because we don't see them. We don't see chemicals escaping through our air. We don't see them in the water. But the consequences of this is very real, and I think we can do better.
Can I guess the format of the email? Is it 5 reasons why I'm not an industrial polluter? And then they have to provide 5 bullet points?
I think the subject line was like a fork in the road. Chemicals or something. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about the email or what it requires, but I don't think that that's adequate. I don't care what the email is asking you. It's not adequate.
I would just like to understand how people reconcile this all of a sudden very good push to get chemicals and ultra-processed foods and dyes banned from our food supply chain, but at the same time be able to throw all these pollutants into our environment. It's like, whoa, you can throw it into your body, or you can't throw it in your body, but I mean, if it's just in the air,
yeah,
you're fine. Just the air and the water.
I mean, only if you really don't like doing it.
Yeah, I mean,
then just send us an email if you really don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, technically, if the arsenic is in the water that is used to make the dye, then still illegal. Jeff, I'll be honest, I completely missed this one. And I'm going to use the general excuse that it came out while I was on vacation without looking at the date. But did you see this one? And, I mean, your thoughts on, I guess, looking, I think this was this part of the fallout of the biggest day and deregulation history. Is this part of that?
I don't know.
With Lee Zeppelin?
I don't know.
Your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely piggybacks off of that. And I guess all I would say is I am totally on board for helping support manufacturers more. I think the government could also always do more to help them operate more cleanly and more efficiently and more effectively when you're looking at any regulation, especially when it comes to the environmental stuff, which at times I feel does go a little bit overboard. However, in this case, we're moving backwards. What's that about? That's not what we do. We don't move backwards. We move ahead. And that's what this is basically perpetuating. It's a race to the bottom.
Well, and I mean, kind of opposed to this, I didn't see a lot of, there was a lot of industry response to the tariffs, to the de minimis loophole. Like, I didn't see a lot of groups coming out and applauding this.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that that's just anecdotally to myself, but like, I mean, to both of your points, like manufacturing as a whole has done so much to be better corporate citizens. And, I see this, yes, as a step backwards from a regulatory perspective, but I don't know that there are any manufacturers that are going, yes, back to the waste in the barrels buried in the hills, I think as an industry overall, we are moving forward. Jeff, you're in case you missed it this week.
Yeah, so I picked an article talking about the top 10 passwords hackers are using to access remote desktops. So a company called SpecOps Software basically came out with a list. They're looking specifically at basically remote access. So in manufacturing, this is something we deal with quite a bit, people working from home. And we're not just talking about stuff, checking your email through, a website or something like that. This is different things people are doing, whether it's on your phone, some other device, to basically log into your work network and do any kind of monitoring, whether it's stuff going on the plant floor, things that might be going on in different areas of your operation. They're vulnerable because guess what? Anytime you plug into a network from someplace else, there's a connection point in between here that can definitely be manipulated. Yeah. It can definitely be vulnerable. Is definitely vulnerable. So if you have any of these top 10 passwords that are most vulnerable to hackers, please change them. They are really, they're ingenious. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Password 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Password spelled with the @ and a capital O. Password all lowercase. Password 1, 2, 3. Welcome 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because somebody's trying to get real tricky.
Mm-hmm. Whoa, that's a good one.
Uppercase A, lowercase a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're using any of these, please do your company, your coworkers, yourself, your family a favor and change them. Because once they get in to any place on the network, they can go any place on the network. So if they're getting into a place that you use to check in and maybe check pH balance levels on water or some sort of chemical, they can use that to then weed into your ERP and your supply chain, and then maybe payroll, and then get a lot of personal data and a lot of IP data. Don't do that.
Can't administrators prevent these passwords?
They sure could, David.
Oh, and they don't?
They sure don't, David.
Oh.
Do you want to know why? Because a lot of people complain saying, I can't remember the password.
Okay. Well, remember your new password. You're going to be fired 1.
Yeah.
And if you can't remember that one.
I'm sorry. Just a couple other things, too, in terms of possible solutions. There's some other things that are listed in the article. But just one thing to remember, 24% of all attack passwords are just numbers. So mix it up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And double factor authentication, turns out it works.
Fine,
yeah.
Because then, hackers have to guess 2 things instead of 1, and a lot of times they just give up.
Well, they have to, but then they also need access to the device, right?
Well, they would need it sent to them, which there is a way around that, but just
makes it harder.
Yeah. All the things.
Man. Well, Anna, I guess Jeff's weekly scary cybersecurity story is not as scary, just more like, hey, do better.
Yeah,
this is a simple one, guys.
This is an easy one. Low-hanging fruit on the IT side.
It's not as personally scary because I do not have any of these passwords.
No.
Or do you?
You know what? Whatever. Don't try it.
But that was wasn't that like a part of hackers, from the 90s? That the most common password used anywhere that was always hacked was password?
Yeah.
I
like welcome 1. Like, who are you welcoming? The hacker?
Welcome to my network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have passed the first test. Welcome.
Yes.
But, yeah.
So the key takeaway is just let's do a little better.
Yeah, try a little harder. I think that could be done.
Not asking too much there.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, in case you missed it this week, I was trying to, I was picking something a little bit more uplifting.
Thank you.
Completely unrelated to anything but the medical industry. No. So I picked the story: world's smallest pacemaker can be inserted with a syringe. Northwestern University engineers have developed a pacemaker that is so small it fits inside the tip of that tiny little syringe, and it can be non-invasively injected into your body. This thing can work with hearts of all sizes, but it was made for tiny, fragile hearts of newborn babies with congenital heart defects. It is smaller than a single grain of rice, and paired with a small, soft, flexible, wireless wearable device that mounts onto your chest or the patient's chest to control the pacing. When the wearable detects that an irregular heartbeat is happening, it automatically shines a light pulse, which can go through your skin and sternum and activate the pacemaker. These short pulses control the pacing. This is designed for patients who need temporary pacing. The pacemaker, when it's done, dissolves inside you, and it's when it's no longer needed. All the pacemaker's components are biocompatible, so they naturally dissolve into the body's biofluids, bypassing the need for surgical extraction. I picked this for in case you missed it because everyone should read this story because it is incredibly inspiring in terms of what we are doing from a medical perspective and what we are still capable of when it comes to medical advances. When you look at this thing, it is hard to get your mind around that on the tip of this person's finger is a pacemaker. And I mean, we're talking about, babies that didn't have a chance that now could live. We're talking about people that instead of having very invasive, not very invasive, they've gotten a lot better, but still pacemaker implant surgeries. To think that could just be something that at least temporarily and maybe in the future is just an injectable is wild. I mean, think of the world's first pacemaker and think about how, in a couple of years, it could just be like, yep, you're out of rhythm. Hold still. And then you take the old Pulp Fiction to the chest and you're fine. Anna, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this story, but I found it very inspiring.
I didn't, but I did also find it very inspiring. So thank you for bringing this to the podcast. That's really heartening to see. And the only thing I can think about is like how they would test this on an infant or, did they say?
They tested it on animals and then they also tested on cadaver hearts.
Oh,
so
okay.
they tested it on deceased individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it can go to the next phase of clinical study now.
Yeah, that's incredible. Obviously, anything that's like as the least invasive way to help a newborn baby, just amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, and Jeff, I sometimes get a little conspiratorial when it comes to injectable medical devices and their ability to be able to maybe change the way you think. But this one's just going to keep you in rhythm, and I think that's pretty cool.
It is. I just hope the next part of this development is also tracking exactly when it's starting to dissolve.
Yes.
That would be a big part of this for me,
Sure.
just understanding that. So
I hope that they do have a firmer grasp of the timeline where it's just like.
Should be like a day or two, you're good.
Yeah, it's when you forget to take your medicine for a couple of days and you call and they're just like, oh, no, you're fine. Just take one. You're all right. Just get back on track. And they're just like, if you don't take this on Wednesday, bad things happen. So
that brings up a good point, though. I mean, this could at some point almost be like, you could have like a case of these, right? And just like inject it every week or something.
I think, I mean,
do it
yes.
yourself. I mean, just
like
a
quick heart injection.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
Sounds like something I do.
Yeah. Maybe, or I could see it more being built a little bit more durably as it's powered externally, and just being a little bit more robust. It's the word we cut out of every press release. Why can't I think of it? Robust.
All right, Jeff. We'll be sending you home with this kit, and then just once a week, just inject this into your baby's heart.
Okay. Never mind.
All right.
I get it.
Yeah.
You know what?
Well,
I mean,
well done.
I am all for convenience. But you know what? I'm going to take the time off to bring the kid in for that
I think
one.
so.
Yeah.
I think I would.
Yeah.
Have a professional do it. Before we get out of here, and apologies for going a little long this week, but we had some meaty topics we had to chew into. Let's jump into our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
So we were staying at a hotel for a few days for spring break, and it was the second time in my life that this has happened where the fire alarm at the hotel went off in the middle of the night.
Oh.
2 times this has happened in like the last couple of years. And both times no one says anything about it. Like the next day, it's just you just move on with life as if nothing had happened, even though we all slept terribly, or me mostly. But and I just feel like if the fire alarm goes off at a hotel, that I expect a coupon of some type. Just, I don't even care what it is. Like, give me a cup of coffee from your restaurant. That's what I expect.
Give me $10 to the sundries.
Yeah.
You know?
Sundries,
Just
yeah.
Let me take 3 to 4 bags of those overpriced chips, and it's going to go a long way.
Give me a beach ball. I'll take it to the pool. I don't care what it is. But say something about it.
A beach ball that just says, sorry you slept poorly.
Yeah. Sorry about
Sorry
the
sleep.
a fire. Yeah. I don't know.
We're sorry.
We're sorry.
Didn't actually burn down.
Yep.
No, it's but you know what? That's never happened to me in a hotel, but it's happened in the office, and it's crazy how like the alarm goes off, everyone's outside, and you know the firefighters come, and then afterwards, everyone's just like they think that you feel so lucky that it's not an actual fire, that they're not just like, hey, sorry about the inconvenience. They're just like, ha ha, but no fire though, so we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I was glad there wasn't a fire. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was because it actually went off twice. Like after I'd fallen back asleep, it went off again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I missed out on a good 2 hours. And you know, you're with your kids, and everybody in the pool was so cranky the next day. I really could have used that free coffee, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, or at least a little bit, give you some information. Just be like, yeah, a kid pulled the thing. You know, some drunk guy fell into it. Legitimately, someone was smoking in the room. Just anything.
Just tell me.
Anything. Yeah. Not just like it's probably a defect. My final thought this week is, you know, we don't do this often, but I just wanted to say when it comes to subscribers, we've plateaued a bit. So if you could help us out by, you know, recommending this to your friends and colleagues, anyone in the manufacturing industry, anyone that's even, you know, interested in just hearing, you know, the top news of the week, we'd really appreciate it if you could sort of help us spread the word and grow our subscriber base a little bit. You know, we have slowly and organically cultivated this really impassioned group of listeners, and we love it. And we just like to have more people at the party. So if you could really help us out, I'd appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in every week, watching, listening to us, and emailing us. You know, it's really been one of my highlights of every week. So just kind of help us grow this thing.
Absolutely.
Jeff, your final thought this week.
So I told you guys last week I was reorganizing my garage. I was pretty excited about it. This entailed assembling a couple of different containers, a big plastic one to put outside, this huge metal storage cabinet. And my wife was good enough to help me, help me put this together. She isn't always the most patient, gets a little frustrated. You know, the instructions are not great. There's a little bit of interpretation there. But we did get through them. And we got everything assembled. We're not divorced, so it's all good there. But I was talking to my daughter about this process a little bit, and I'm like, I don't know, I think I'm pretty patient when I'm going through this stuff with you guys. And she's like, you are, Dad, but you have this tone. And then my wife comes along, she's like, yeah, you really do.
You have a tone, Dad.
And what this showed me, more than anything else, is sometimes the people you love the most and you care about the most and you're closest to can be 100% wrong. Oh. I do not have a tone. I am extremely patient, and I don't know what they're talking about. So that's what I learned this week.
Do they have a name for your tone?
No.
Oh, because my wife likes to say, oh, I didn't know Business David was here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Producer Eric knows it. He's heard it.
Business David.
So once and let me tell you what, when there's a name for it, it really helps you calm down in the moment, Jeff.
Oh, I'm sure that you especially just let that go. Like, that doesn't bother you. You don't dwell on it.
Yeah. I breathe twice and I'm just like, we're all friends here.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you do have a tone. No. Just messing around. Did you, everything organized? You happy with how it came out?
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very
right.
happy.
Like just in your happy place, just
kind of.
Did you stand in the garage with like that last beer and just like, we did it?
I'm about 85% done.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. But I still had many beers.
Yes. All right.
You don't have to wait.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine. Join us every Thursday when we go live, and subscribe to our newsletters daily and weekly so you can get it delivered to your inbox first. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.